Hello, my name is Marcy Roth, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer for the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategy. Thank you very much for joining us for disability inclusion before, during, and after disasters. Oh dear. Okay, so all of a sudden it's not changing slides. Can we start that over again, please? Oh, I'm live. Uh, oh, I thought we were recording. Oh, okay. Well, then I will continue. So, the mission of the partnership is equal access to emergency programs and services and full inclusion of the whole community before, during, and after disasters. Uh, the partnership has a focus both in the US and globally, and we are one of two organizations in the world that has a mission that focuses exclusively on disabilities and disasters. Our focus on disability and inclusion, it brings us to focusing on the critical need for technology throughout the disaster cycle. So, to give some perspective, there are over 1 billion people with disabilities across the globe. And this includes many people who are forcibly displaced. This includes many people who have inadequate access to water, shelter, or food. And then this also, of course, results in people not having access to wheelchairs, crutches, scooters, the many things that make it possible for people to get themselves out of harm's way and into a safe location. People with disabilities are 2 to 4 times more likely to die in a crisis situation than the rest of the population. And as a result of these statistics and the realities for many people, the imperative for um, using technology to improve outcomes is something that we are deeply committed to. Among our approaches is the establishment of a disaster deployment assistance team, which is pictured here. And our team, unlike many emergency response teams, is comprised of people with firsthand knowledge about disability and accessibility. So I'm going to share a very brief video about some of the work of our team when they deployed to Puerto Rico during Hurricane Maria.
Many Puerto Ricans with disabilities have been left behind by the relief response to Hurricane Maria. That's why experts in inclusive disaster management, Portlight Strategies, sent relief workers with and without disabilities to Puerto Rico.
Hey everyone, this is the crew from Portlight Strategies. We've got water, we've got diapers, we've got food, we've got hygiene products. We're going to get all of these out to people with disabilities and the elderly today.
Portlight makes relief accessible to everyone who needs it, delivering supplies to families without access to transportation, like this mother whose son relies on a ventilator to breathe. Providing information to people left out of communication, like this woman at a shelter where nobody knew sign language, and bringing new meaning to the phrase, nothing about us without us. You can learn more and follow along at portlight.org, and let leaders know real emergency planning plans for everyone. Share this video.
Uh, I hope this gave you an opportunity to imagine some of the areas in which even in the complex circumstances of a disaster like Hurricane Maria or many of the places that we deploy to across the globe, that if we had technology solutions that were accessible, that these could really make a big difference in the outcomes for people with disabilities and, in fact, for the whole community. Um, I'm going to share a series of photographs. The purpose of these photographs is to kind of give you some visual examples of both some of the existing technology and some of the challenges that we face during disasters. So, in this first photograph, you will see there are three separate items. We have the round item, which is a bed shaker. It's a vibrating tool that is used for people who are deaf and people who need to be signaled, perhaps when they're asleep. The second item is a voice to text weather radio. And the third item is a braille output keyboard. And when these three items are used together, they've made it possible for people who are deaf and blind to be able to get actionable information that's accessible to them in a disaster. So the bed shaker vibrates and wakes a person up so that they know that the weather radio is delivering a message. That message is not visible or audible for the person who's deaf blind. And so the information from this weather radio is then sent to the braille output keyboard, which then the individual gets that message brailled directly to them so that they know how to take action. It's a great example of the combination of several existing types of technology, but I could imagine that there would be a tremendous additional step that could make technology like this much more um, combined and much more sophisticated in the delivery of important disaster related information. And then in this second photo, you will see that this is a much more typical use of a combination of technologies, including the captioning up at the top of the screen. That's something that's really quite readily available in many newscasts these days. But you'll also see that in the picture in picture, there is a second screen that is providing a sign language interpreter so that the interpreter is always in the screenshot, even when the large screen uh, turns to some other image. In this next photograph, um, one of the challenges that we often face when people are in need of evacuation, if people need to be airlifted out of a disaster impacted area, their accessibility devices are frequently not evacuated with them. So, this is a rather dramatic example of how an individual's wheelchair is being evacuated so that when the person arrives in the evacuation area, that the equipment that that person needs in order to maintain their health, their safety, and their independence is still available to them. In this next series of photos, this was a partnership between the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies and our Portlight team and the Cajun Navy to get life saving medication to a child in an area that was flooded during Hurricane Harvey. So you will see just a very short example of a much more complicated operation in which medication was brought from one part of the state of Texas to a family who, even though their yard has no water, they were completely cut off. There was no route into the area that had not been flooded. And so this made it possible to get medication to this family and to the child when it was otherwise not available to them. And again, these are uh, visual examples of some of the complexities that we deal with on a regular basis in reducing the disproportionate impact of disasters on people with disabilities, people with medical support needs, and people who um, are isolated from any other sort of assistance. Again, these are a series of photographs of our teammates who are working together with the National Guard to get supplies to people who've been evacuated and who need immediate health maintenance supplies in order to maintain their health, their safety, and their independence. In addition to the work that we do during disasters, we also focus on significant policy changes. And we currently have two pieces of legislation in the US that have been introduced into our Congress. And we're also working collaboratively with folks across the globe around some policy initiatives. And so I'm going to share a video that doesn't focus so much on the legislation that we're working on, but it does, in fact, give you some additional statistics that should help you to be aware of the numbers of people and the types of circumstances that could benefit from inclusive technology development.
Scenes of the interior and exterior of a flood-destroyed home in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey are shown in the background.
There were 122 major disasters in the United States in 2017 and 2018, and the frequency, intensity, and duration of disasters is on the rise. Almost 3 million children in the United States have disabilities. 1 in 4 adults in the US also has a disability. Over 2.5 million people use medical equipment and devices that require electricity. 55% of Americans need prescription medication, an average of 4 prescriptions each. 15% of the population is over age 65. Within the next 40 years, this will grow to 1 in 4 people in the United States. 71% of deaths in Hurricane Katrina were people over the age of 60. Nearly 50% of the deaths in Superstorm Sandy and 77% of people who died in the California wildfires were over 65, and many had disabilities. Our communities need to be ready in disasters. For more information, visit reaadi.com. Real Emergency Access for Aging and Disability Inclusion in Disasters Act.
Yellow and black ready logo struck by a bolt of lightning. Data sources can be found in the video transcript.
So I shared that video again to give you some additional data about US disasters. And Okay, so it's important to point out that disaster impact not only affects people with disabilities, but it is the impact of disasters is felt by the whole community, including uh, people, uh, their families, and the people who live in the disaster impacted areas. And uh, one of the best quotes for understanding just how um, impactful disasters can be is also to point out that disasters can be an opportunity. Uh, with the danger that comes from a disaster, there is also the opportunity to invest in improvements in physical accessibility, program accessibility, effective communication access. And so, uh, for folks who are committed to innovation, who are using their coding skills and their creativity to use the circumstances around disasters to build new solutions. I think this opportunity is best described as a crisis is an opportunity riding on a dangerous wind. And this is the word crisis is depicted by um, these two symbols in the Chinese language. So, in summary, the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies welcomes every opportunity to work with coders, work with teams that are developing new technologies to make sure that those technologies provide accessibility for the whole community. This is not only smart business practice, but this is a way to strengthen all communities before disaster strikes. So we thank you very much for the opportunity to share what I hope are some thought provoking um, details that you may not have considered before. Thank you very much.